So I'm killing my import plants. Actually, they're not even my plants, they're my friend's plants, so maybe that's worse. I have exactly 5 months to salvage these plants, or not only face the wrath of my friends, but also the shame and embarrassment of trying to give out plant tips online and not being able to salvage these. So, where did this all begin? An opportunity came up for me to purchase some houseplants through an import. Two of my friends had been looking to expand their indoor collections as well, so we put our heads together and we made a pact. Each person purchases one plant and we all split the shipping. When they arrive, we root them, air layer them, propagate them, and each person receives one of each cutting. It's like a 3-for-1. While the plants did ship bare root, here's how they showed up to me, placed in a mixture of sphagnum moss and perlite. We ordered a philodendron splendid, a philodendron mayoi, and a philodendron abatipoense. And to my surprise, even with delays, they shipped mostly okay. Mostly. Root development looked pretty good, no signs of rot, but we would have to treat this with a high amount of care. And the philodendron splendid, the most expensive out of all the plants, was in really rough shape. I was pretty convinced that this plant was not even going to make it. There was hardly any root development, and what was there was thin and crispy. It was pretty clear that this plant was a top cutting and likely just not rooted at all. It was definitely going to lose that lower leaf too. The three most important things for the recovery of your import plants is patience, vigilance, and humidity. One of the easiest ways to create humidity is to make a greenhouse effect with a small enclosed space, somewhere where light can get in and a limited amount of moisture can escape. And most importantly, you don't want to completely seal this bag for an extended period. So while these plants continue to grow, I'll do my best to air layer them where I can and get them prepared for the next step, switching these plants to leca. Leca is just what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe unforgiving. I've said in the past that it's extremely challenging to convert a plant that's in another medium into leca, and that goes for sphagnum moss as well. Moss tends to stick to the roots of the plant, and it's so challenging to get off. I don't know what kind of brand of moss this was, but I spent 2 whole hours doing the best I could of getting this moss off the roots. Finally, I said good enough. It wasn't good enough. The reason why we use moss when acclimatizing import plants is because it provides a really great medium for roots to form. It's light, it provides a lot of access to oxygen so that the roots can expand quickly. It retains just enough water not to suffocate the roots. The problems arise when you leave too much sphagnum moss attached to the roots, especially when transferring it to another medium like water, soil, or leca. It sticks to the roots, it takes up water from everywhere around it. It makes the roots stay too wet for too long, and that's actually what causes your roots to start rotting. Now, moss isn't the only option to root import cuttings, but I do think it's the best. They've been in transit for so long, and the damp, dark environment with no airflow is just the perfect place for it to develop root rot causing bacteria. You don't need to be as thorough if you're transferring it to soil, but when you're going to something like leca, you need to be perfect. If you really want to make sure the moss is off completely, you should have a few buckets of lukewarm water and just keep submerging the roots while you pinch and roll off the moss between your fingers. The roots, especially near the ends, should be mostly white. You can also experiment with other mediums by mixing them together. Even perlite and leca will reduce the amount of moss you need to use. You can even try weird stuff like this. And now, here we are. During the 2 months in leca, I thought everything was fine, but it turns out the roots were absolute garbage, and I didn't even realize that until the leaves started showing visible signs of distress. The roots just kind of turned to mush. If you've ever watched a Kaylee Ellen video and you've seen her pull off the rot from an import, it's kind of just left with this thin hair. Thankfully, the rot hadn't reached the stem. Everything was still firm, so I cut off what I could. Also, luckily, this new root was growing in the pale green section here, so there was still hope for this plant. I soaked the plant in a hydrogen peroxide and water mix for about 20 minutes, and after that, I just put it right back into water to continue to recover. The one silver lining is that I discovered that the philodendron mayoi is basically an indestructible plant. This thing grows so fast, doesn't seem fazed by poor care, and I was able to get so many cuttings from this thing it was insane. 10 out of 10, I would recommend again. I was actually surprised at how well the philodendron splendid recovered. I'm honestly shocked at how hardy this plant was, and I'm so glad because honestly, it's such a great plant to grow. And While the original leaves did end up falling off, it produced a bunch of new smaller leaves, and I must just be really good at taking care of plants because I really thought this thing was a goner. I'm really running low on time and I honestly don't think I'll be able to get this done. The Abatapoense made a stunning recovery and is just pushing out so many roots. I think it's pushing out a second shoot, but the Abatapoense roots are unlike any other philodendron that I've seen, so it's actually quite hard to tell what is a root and what's a new shoot for some time until it develops a little bit more. I'm pretty confident that this is a new shoot, so I made the executive decision to cut this plant and pot them up into soil. Now that the Splendid has adjusted, I really need to air layer this thing like yesterday. So I'm sticking it into my signature moss tube because the aerial roots on this thing just aren't really growing. If you haven't seen my video on how to make these moss tubes, you should really check it out. They're especially great when you need to do something ridiculous like this and you need it done quickly. Just cram the moss into the tube and you're basically done after you strap the plant up. I just have to be a little bit careful to make sure the moss at the bottom of this doesn't stay too moist.
Haley, do you think we can get the plants this weekend?
So I'm just straight up out of time now. I just have to box everything up and call this a mostly successful import and propagation. If I had another 2 or 3 weeks time, I think I could have pulled this off, but what are you gonna do? I'm also including a few "I'm sorry this took so long" cuttings, and I'm dropping it off at my friend's house.
Thanks for the plants. They look great. But I thought you were going to come in and say hi, not just drop off the box and leave. Also, where is the Splendid you were going to give us?
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Caroline, but the Splendid, it didn't make it. Maybe next time.